What is up, people? Welcome back to another video, well, live stream, but those of you that are watching this after the fact, it'll be a video. Let's just move that across, that's a bit better. There we go. Hope you guys are having a good week. Mine has been relatively chilled, so yeah, not too bad. I headed to my local game store, which is, well, I say local, it's still about what, an hour's drive from here. But anyway, so I headed there last night for a little bit of Commander, because it's Tuesday is Commander night at the Bat Cave, which if you are down Durban way, you will probably know of the Bat Cave. And yeah, spent some time playing. Well, I only managed to get one game in before I decided to make the trek back. It was a relatively long game. We were there for what, 3 hours, I think, thereabouts. So yeah. Anyway, back to my intro to Magic the Gathering. And this week I'm going to be talking a little bit about the different formats that you have in Magic, depending on kind of what you want to play. So I'm going to swap across and just so you've got something fun to look at. But yeah, if you have any questions while I'm streaming, drop them in the chat. I'm happy to answer anything as we are going through. Like I did last week, there were a couple questions about bits and pieces. But just to give you guys an idea, when I started off playing in 2011, the first deck that I actually bought is here somewhere. Let me see if I can find it. That is an empty box. There we go. So I have dismantled this a little bit, so in part, but to give you guys an idea, the deck that I bought at the time was from the brand new set at the time, which was New Phyrexia, which is still probably one of my favorite planes that they've ever visited. And so I ended up buying them as kind of just encouragement from a friend. He was like, why don't you get some Magic cards instead of, well, I was going to buy Pokemon cards. And yeah, he was like, I'll teach you how to play, because he'd been playing for a few years already. And that's kind of how I got into it. So I bought my first 60 card deck. And that was my introduction to Magic, is this deck, which actually, let me find, that was the foil card that came as the box kind of topper. So let's get a bit of a zoom in there, and why is the watermark back? Okay, one sec. Give me a second. I am not too sure what is going on with this app. If I do that, okay, watermark is gone. Cool. Okay, so yeah, this was the first deck that I ever got. It was a green-white deck, so uses plains and forests. And the main theme of it was essentially around splices and let me find ones that are actually in here. Murs to produce some mana, and there's another splicer. Where are the golems? golems. Okay. So the concept. So the nice thing about a 60 card deck, so the format like standard or modern, okay? So it's a 60 card deck, and you can have up to 4 copies of any given card. So if we take a look, I probably have a couple gold Murs in here. Actually, I may have taken some of the others out. Maul Splasher, Vital Splasher, Vital Splasher. And so the nice thing about being able to have multiple copies of cards is that you can then increase your chance of getting a particular card that you're wanting to play. So, there we go. Okay, Gold Myr. And then if we take a look, so 2 Sensor Splicers, 2 Master Splicers, 2 Vital Splicers, and I'm pretty sure I've got another Maul Splicer in here somewhere. But yeah, so it had a bunch of these Myrs, which you could get out relatively soon because they're 2 mana cost, and then they tap to produce mana. Now, if you're not 100% sure exactly what I'm talking about with regards to mana cost and tapping for mana, then go take a look at episode 1 of this series. I discuss and explain a bunch of that with regards to paying mana costs to play creatures and things. So it might give you a better idea of exactly what I'm talking about, and then you can come back to this to hear the rest of the explanation. So, cheap mana cost creatures that can then produce mana helps you get your bigger stuff out quickly. So if we take a look at, for example, at Vital Splicer. Oh, there's my other Maul Splicer. It's right there. It was one that I pulled out earlier. So if we take a look at Sensor Splicer, it's a 5 mana cost. So if you're playing, if you play, what, a Gold Myr on turn 2 and another one on turn 3, by turn 4 you've already got the option to play one of these guys. And if you take a look at the effect, so as I mentioned, the deck's kind of focus was to get the splicers out, because they then allow you to create a 3/3 creature for free. It's called a token, and then the thing that the splicers do is give them those 1-word abilities. So we discussed those in last week's episode. So if you aren't 100% sure when I'm talking about things like Trample, and Vigilance, and First Strike, go back and watch last week's episode to get an idea of kind of what I'm talking about there. And so, yeah, get out as many of the splicers as you can to build an army of golems. And once you've got this army of golems, then the splicers will give them extra abilities like Vigilance, First Strike, Trample. Master Splicer makes them stronger, so it gives them +1/+1, so it pushes them up to a 4/4 golem. And if you've got both Master Splicers out, then it becomes a 5/5 golem. There's one that gives flying, but so as I mentioned, this was a green-white deck, but I did end up modifying it because there is another splicer here, Wing Splicer, that gives golems flying. So that became quite useful for me to have in here. And so I then threw in some of the other color Myrs. So these are colorless. So I can use the green and white lands to play them. And then I've got access to other color mana by tapping them. So those became useful. I threw in one of each color, or two of each color. So Silver Myr, Iron Myr, Leaden Myr, and then Copper was green and Gold was white. So I had access to every color, and that just kind of gave me a better range of things to do Also, because I had this as a golem that I added to the deck, Etched Monstrosity. And if you look here, so he's a 10/10 for 5, but if you pay another 5, you can remove. So he enters with 5 -1/-1 counters. So he enters as a 5/5. But then if you pay one of each color, you can remove 5 -1/-1 counters. And then draw 3 cards off of it. So it becomes quite useful being able to do that. And with the access to all the different types of mana, if I can get the Murs out nice and quickly, then you can have a 10/10 relatively quickly by like turn 6 or 7, if you manage to draw the right bits and pieces. So yeah, I ended up modifying this to add in a bunch of bigger, scarier golems, just to add a little bit more power to the deck. But as kind of time progresses and they release new sets, the deck that you're playing, which at the time this was a standard deck, so I could play it in a standard tournament. Standard only is a certain amount of sets from the recent set that you can play with. So you can only choose cards for your deck from those sets. And I think currently it's like the last 3 years worth of sets. I think Crimson Vow and what's the werewolf one? Midnight Hunt. They just phased out of the standard rotation. So once they leave standard, they then move into what's known as modern. And modern is a far bigger range of options from which sets you can use cards from. I'm just going to pull up the list quickly here. Just to give me an idea of what is playable. Okay. It doesn't tell me here. Okay, so there. Okay, so what sets are legal? Everything all the way back to the original Mirrodin set, which is from 2009-ish. So you have an option for quite a lot more in modern. And because of that, because you've got more options when playing modern for what you can have in your deck, your decks end up becoming a lot scarier. Modern is also a set, or a format rather, that you can have up to 4 copies of each card in your deck. And so people are running decks with 4 copies of like each of the most ridiculous cards. And they just kind of storm you. And if you don't have the money to buy those ridiculously overpowered cards, then your deck just can't compete. And that's kind of why I like Commander, is because so Commander is what's known as a singleton format, which means that you're only allowed 1 copy of each card in your deck. There are some exceptions to that rule. Obviously, basic lands, you're allowed to have as many copies as you'd like. And then there are some cards like Relentless Rats, which, let me see if I can find a picture of Relentless Rats. Another option is okay, let's save that. Rat Colony. So it's quite a common thing in rats as a creature type to have the ability to play as many as you want in a single of that kind of card in a single deck. Save. Okay, let me just quickly see if I can find a particular card. Save. Okay, so if I now go and find the pictures that I just saved so that I can show you guys. Done there. Okay, so I'll leave that up, but then I'll just drag that in. Okay. So the kind of cards I'm talking about are these. So even though it's part of a singleton format where you can only have one copy of each particular card, you get cards like this where you're then able to have multiple copies. So you can see here it says a deck can have any number of cards named Rat Colony. So that in itself circumvents that rule of only allowing one copy of that particular card. And I've downloaded Pack Rat, not a Relentless Rat. Why are you doing this to me? Save image. Save. Okay, so that, and we want that one rather. Okay, there we go. Relentless Rats. So rat decks can are typically run multiple copies of rats like these. And so the more you have out, so you can see Rat Colony makes your rats bigger. Relentless Rats make other creatures named Relentless Rats bigger. A deck can have any number of cards named Relentless Rats. So for the most part, as I mentioned, your commander deck can only have one copy of a particular card, but there are these exceptions to the rule, which are very few and far between. And so because of that, sure, your deck is 100 cards as opposed to 60, and if you're only having one copy of each card in a deck, then it reduces the chances of you getting a particular card that you're wanting to play. So people then start building decks around a particular combo, and then they find cards that kind of work into that particular combo, so they've got multiple versions of that same combo. But yeah, it to me it feels like it's a lot more random, which makes it a little bit more enjoyable. So yes, there's a skill element. Obviously, you need to know what your cards do. You need to know how to combo them off well. But there's more of a random element. And another thing to it is, because you're not buying up to 4 copies of a particular really expensive card, there's like less money needed to build a decent deck. Sure, I mean, obviously if you pour a ridiculous amount of money into a deck, then it's going to be potentially really good, because there's a reason why those cards are really expensive. So for example, speaking of a really expensive deck, so this deck that I'm about to show you guys is proxied. So they aren't real cards. I've only got about 4 of the cards in this. It's a deck that I'm building that I would like to buy the cards for one day, but it's a very expensive deck that I've tried to build. I printed the copies of the cards just to play test it, get an idea of kind of how it plays, how it feels, and so I will only be able to play it amongst friends. Like, I wouldn't be able to play it in a legitimate tournament. So it's only really for like a casual, friendly game with mates. Which I played some Magic this past weekend. I actually played. How long did we play for? We played for about 12 hours. So we had a decent day of just playing some casual Commander with a decent sized group of us. There were about 15 or 16 of us, and so I asked the guys if I could test this out. It's designed for competitive play. So let me put this on camera so you guys can see it. It's designed for competitive play. And so it is also it's a particularly expensive deck for when I build it. All the particular copies of these cards that I'm wanting, the particular artworks, all in all, this deck comes to about 165,000 Rand, which for context, I don't know what the exchange rate is on that. For those of you overseas, so that's just under $10,000. So it's a relatively expensive deck for me to build. So this is going to be like a long-term thing, which it'll be an investment that I want to actually like invest in the hobby, because I would like to play competitively one day. But just to give you guys an idea, so like Mana Vault, that particular version of it, very expensive. Overgrown Tomb, that particular version, also very expensive. That particular printing of the One Ring, very expensive. So I can actually tell you what the pricing of each of these cards is. It's a 3-color deck. So yes, like if you're going to branch out into the competitive world of Magic the Gathering and actually want to play in a tournament to compete and potentially win money, then sure, you're going to have to invest a decent amount of money in it. But to get a decent deck, you don't have to pour a ridiculous amount of money into this as a hobby. You can buy pre-constructed decks, which the pre-constructed decks in like the last 2 years have actually been really good. So there's no need to go out of your way to buy anything kind of bigger and better than that. So at the moment I'm just going through and finding all of the like very expensive cards, just to give you guys an idea. Breeding Pool is also pretty expensive. City of Brass, not so much. Mox Opal, Soul Ring, the Rhystic Study, the Chrome Mox. I think the Sylvan Library is also pretty expensive. The Grim Monolith, Polluted Delta, Misty Rainforest, Force of Negation, Pact of Negation. Okay, so to give you guys an idea of kind of how expensive cards can get, and remember, so I said that this deck, when it's finished, will be worth about 165,000 Rand. That's kind of current pricing values, and obviously will change over the years as kind of prices for cards fluctuate. But if I were to buy the cheapest versions of each of these cards, rather than these particular artworks that I'm wanting, then that would bring the price down to somewhere around the 72,000 Rand range, 78,000 thereabouts. So it would drastically bring the price down. That's those two are in the wrong place. There, there, and there. That can go there. And these can go there together. Okay, so just to put it into perspective, kind of what pricing we're looking at for some of these. So I'll go through these particular printings of some of the artifacts that I'm putting into this deck. And so just to give you an idea, so we've got these. So these particular versions of these cards are the Kaladesh Inventions versions. So Chrome Mox, which actually I've printed the wrong version of that. I want to print the Kaladesh Inventions one rather than the version I've printed. Or I want to get the Kaladesh Inventions one. So there, Chrome Mox. Okay, the Kaladesh Inventions version of this card is currently sitting at 11,000 Rand. This particular version is, I'll tell you now, sitting at only 3,000 Rand. So, I mean, it would be more viable for me to go with this particular version, but I like the Kaladesh Inventions version. I will show you what that looks like in comparison. So that's what the Chrome Mox looks like in comparison. You can see this particular like orange border. You'll see a pattern. Obviously these all have that same border. So yeah, that's why I'm wanting to get these as like a matching set of all of those. But yeah, so that's what the Chrome Mox would look like. And you can see probably why these are so expensive. So these are all 0 mana cost or 1 mana cost. So Mana Crypt, 0 mana cost. Mox Opal, 0. Mana Vault, 1. Sol Ring, 1. Lotus Petal, 0. So they're cards that you would be able to get out potentially very quickly. I mean, if you had this in your opening hand, that would be ridiculous, because then you'd have mana to pretty much be able to do whatever you want. So Mana Crypt, you can tap it to produce 2 mana. Sol Ring, same thing, tap it to produce 2. Mox Opal, so you can only do this if you have 3 or more artifacts out, but if you've got these 3 out, then you're good to go, and it taps for 1 of any color. Mana Vault, so it doesn't untap during your untap step, and at the beginning of your draw step, if Mana Vault is tapped, it deals 1 damage to you, so you do take damage off of that, but this taps for 3. Lotus Petal, also 0 mana cost, so you can tap it, sack it, and add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. So it's a lot of very quick mana to get. Oh, and then Chrome Mox, 0 mana cost, and add 1 mana of any. You may exile a non-artifact, non-land card, and then you can tap it to add 1 mana of any of the exiled card's colors. So that's why those are fairly expensive, and those printings are also, they're relatively rare to find. A lot of those were only printed in foil, so the shiny finish like that, so the colorful shiny finish. So yeah, that's what kind of adds to the price of those. And then we've got the Zendikar Expeditions versions of the lands. So Overgrown Tomb. Oh, I was going to tell you the cost of these others. So Lotus Petal, that's a 12,000 Rand card. Mana Vault, that is 9.2 thousand Rand. Mox Opal is 9.2. Mana Crypt is 17,000. Sol Ring is 16,000 Rand. So those are all really expensive cards. Okay. And then we have the Zendikar Expansion or Expeditions lands. Let me just scroll down to my lands. But before I show you those, there are the original dual lands that I want to get. So these, if you take a look at the set symbol over here, so these would be the secret lair printing versions of these. And Bayou, so that one there, is currently 4.2 thousand rand. However, that's not the most expensive version of this. The most expensive is 92,000 rand. And that's the alpha version of this card. To be fair, alpha cards, as the name says, I mean, they're alpha, they're from the very first set. They are very valuable. Okay, so that's Bayou, and then if we take a look at Tropical Island and Underground Sea, Tropical Island is 3.3 thousand, Underground Sea is 5.1 thousand rand. So again, even the lands are really expensive in this deck. So the point I'm trying to make, and I mean I can carry on showing you guys the artwork for a lot of these cards, which are they are really pretty, and there's a reason why I'm wanting to get these particular versions of the artwork for these. But yeah, like I said, you don't have to have a ridiculously expensive deck, particularly if you're wanting to just play casually, if you're just, you know, collecting or just playing as a hobby just to have some fun with friends. So there's the option, if you want to go with something more expensive, you can. But if, for example, if you're buying a pre-constructed deck, then you're not paying nearly as much. If we look at, for example, my Infect deck, which I bought as a pre-con, that only cost me, actually I didn't buy that, that was a gift, that was a birthday present, but the person that bought it, they only paid about 1,200 rand, I think, for it. So yeah, in comparison to the 165,000 rand deck that you could have, 1,000 rand and 1,200 rand in the grand scheme of things isn't very much, and it's a very good deck straight out of the box. So that's why I particularly enjoy Commander, and there are a couple other formats that you can play. None that I have a lot of experience with. Formats like Historic and Legacy, again, they also use cards from specific sets, typically your older cards. I'm trying to think, what other formats are there? Pauper is very much like Commander, except you can't use any rare or mythic rare cards. So yeah, you can only use common and uncommon. And then Two-Headed Giant is a particularly fun one as well. So you can play that either using a standard deck or a modern deck. But you play it 2 players on a team, and you group your life total. So I think in Commander it pushes it up to 60 life instead of 40 life to start with. Okay. Yeah, so life at 60 for both teams. The starting team cannot draw on their first turn, so that in that sense, that rule is similar to standard or modern. Commander damage is 21 per commander, so that's normal. same as in the commander format. And infect is 15 damage. So typically, infect damage to a player, you only have to deal 10, so the player would then gain 10 poison counters. However, in Two-Headed Giant Commander, that number goes up to 15 because you could have double the amount of infect creatures out at a time. And then all other standard commander rules apply. So again, deck of 100 cards, one of each, and you have a commander, which is like the general for your deck. So that doesn't get shuffled into the deck. You can play that at any time. You'd be able to play another creature, pretty much. Yeah, so that is kind of just a breakdown of some of the formats that you can play. But yeah, like I say, so Standard, Modern, and Commander are kind of your three biggest formats, particularly at the moment. And so if you're wanting to get into Magic, I would look at going into one of those. And yeah, I'm not gonna go into too much detail or more detail about each of those formats. So they do have like their own particular rules and things. And if there's a particular format that you would like to know more about, I'd be happy to explain. Leave a comment down below. If you're watching this after I've finished the live stream, if there's anyone in chat that has any questions about a particular format, you're welcome to drop it into chat now. But other than that, yeah, there's not much else I would really want to talk about with regards to any of the formats. So at this point, I think what I'll do is I will go through, so I'm going to show you, interestingly enough, actually, just while I'm thinking about it. So my two first decks, so my first standard deck, which then it moved into modern, so this is technically a modern deck, and my first commander deck are both from the world of New Phyrexia, and as well as they are both primarily green and white. So the commander deck is green, white, black, whereas the modern deck is just plain green, white, and then, like I mentioned earlier, I modified it to add all 5 colors. But for the most part, they're very similar, and they play fairly similar as well. They're designed to be pretty quick. I did, when I modified my Golem deck, I slowed it down significantly, so it's a lot slower than what it is designed to be. Well, I say a lot slower. It's not ridiculously slow at this point because of all the Murs in the deck. You still get a lot of mana out pretty quickly. There's also some mana ramp. So when I talk about mana ramp, I'm talking about cards like Rampant Growth, for example, where it allows you to search your deck for particular land. I'm pretty sure I have Rampant Growth in here. I used to. I may have removed it. I've got Giant Growth. Okay, I may have removed some of the mana ramp from this deck, but for the most part, it's pretty much still the same as what it was, just with a few other big creatures. So I'm going to actually show you the two decks in a little bit more detail. Let me just... I'm seeing the number of likes going up on this video, so I'm assuming that there's some people in chat, even though people haven't been dropping chat messages, and that there are currently viewers. But just to give you guys an idea, let's zoom this out a little bit so we can see a little more. To give you an idea of kind of what this deck is about, As I mentioned, okay, it's a 60 card deck, or I think it's slightly over that. But yeah, so it's minimum 60 for standard and modern. You can go over, you can't go under. Whereas Commander, it's very much a hard, like 100 cards is your deck. You can't go higher, you can't go lower. So it's your Commander and then 99 other cards. Typically in a Commander deck, you've got about 36 lands ish in that kind of area. I'd say between like 34 and 37, 38. But yeah, it's typically kind of up to you how many lands you put in. Some people find more lands to be better. Let me get rid of my face. And there we go. My mic is on the corner of the camera there. Okay, cool. So that gives us a little more space to spread things out. Yeah, so when I started playing, this deck in particular, I played for a very long time. So this was my main deck for many years, and a lot of the people that I've taught to play Magic over the years, I've taught them to play using this particular deck. So there are potentially some people watching that recognize some of these cards. Okay, so lands we will just put to the side. Okay, we've got another Splicer there. That's a Golem, so that'll go there. Those are just some random extras. It's another Mer. It's another Mer. It's a Splicer. Okay. What up, what up? Good to see you in chat. Hope you're having a good evening. Just busy going through one of my original decks. Well, actually the very first deck that I ever bought. And just kind of showing a little bit of kind of the modifications that I've made over the years. Golden Burn there, another Golem, artifact, Copper Mer, another Golem, artifact. That I actually potentially need to take out of the deck, as well as that. Although, that being said, the Solitum is pretty much part of a infinite combo that I can do with this deck. We have another Master Splicer and another 2 Sensor Splicers. So here you can see that whole being able to have up to 4 copies of a particular card in the deck. Okay, so Garruk's Pack Leader I could potentially remove as well. I need to actually find the original deck list for this deck, just so that I can go through and see exactly like what I added and what I've removed, what I've modified over time. So the Prismites, although they're golems, I might look at removing them down the line. Chronomaton I find to be very useful. And then if we take a look at some of the bigger golems, so the 2 Thran golems I think were late additions. Precursor and Stone Golem were definitely in here. Phyrexian Hulk was definitely in here. Hexplate Golem, I think, was in the original deck. Crumbling Colossus, I don't think was. Golem Artisan definitely was. Etched Monstrosity was a new addition. Not since I started watching your stream. I missed that. What isn't? So Etched Monstrosity, Colossus of Akros, those were new additions to this. Darksteel, Sentinel, and Platinum Empyrean. So Platinum Empyrean is a particular favorite of mine with regards to golems. Your life total can't change. So yeah, that's a lot of fun. And then Colossus of Akros, because it's indestructible, and when you pay that extra 10 to make it monstrous, if it isn't monstrous yet, you put 10 +1/+1 counters on it, and so it becomes a 20/20. And then if it's monstrous, it can attack, which it can't usually because it's a defender. I'm still very confused by your comments, Lee. Are you a little behind on the stream? Is that in regards to me asking how you're doing? I'm not 100% sure what your comments are about. But yeah, so this is kind of just an idea of what the deck is about. So we have, as I mentioned, we have all the Murs that tap to give you extra mana. So when you play land, you get a couple out quickly, get a couple Murs out. I mean, there's 2, that's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 that tap to give you mana. And part of the infinite combo that I have uses that. Okay. There we go. So go. So essentially, once you've got a few Murs out, okay, and that's why I added Soliton, okay, just in case to add something a little extra. So you would have a couple Murs out just as a way to tap them to get mana. And then you've got Clock of Omens, tap 2 untapped artifacts you control, untap target artifact. Myr Galvanizer is other Myrs, come on focus, there we go. Other Myr creatures you control get +1/+1, so it makes them stronger. And then you tap 1 and this, and untap each other Myr you control. So you untap all the Myrs, tap them again for mana, tap 2 of them for to untap Myr Galvanizer, and then you repeat that. And then Soliton is essentially you tap it and a blue, so silver Myr, to then untap, and then you can tap it again, just to add extra options for what you can tap and untap. So if you've got 2 silver Myrs out, then you can potentially use this just as the one option to untap 2 artifacts for Clock of Omens. So that essentially goes infinite if you've got a couple Myrs out, and it makes you infinite mana, which if you have infinite mana, then you can do something along the lines of well, firstly, Etched Monstrosity, making it stronger, so paying that 5 to remove those -1/-1 counters, paying the 10 for Colossus of Akros to make it monstrous, and then paying something like one of those to either make a creature really strong with +1/+1s, or to give it flying, trample, or haste. There is one thing that I need to put in here, and that is a Darksteel Forge, which I believe makes my artifacts indestructible, just to prevent people from being able to blow up my creatures. So yeah, that's kind of the structure of this deck, and then there's a few other spells in here to make it worthwhile. This one in particular I really like, War Report. You gain life equal to the number of creatures on the battlefield plus the number of artifacts on the battlefield. So if you've got a bunch of golems out, they count as artifact creatures. So you get 2 for each golem you have out, you get 2 for each Mer you have out. And so if you've got a decent amount of creatures out, you're getting a significant amount of life. So that kind of can sustain you. And I've got a couple copies of that in this deck. And then just a few things to destroy your opponent's stuff. Make sure your opponent can't attack. Just to add a little bit of variation into the deck. And so yeah, that's kind of what makes it fun. I did have one other card in here at some point, which is called Door to Nothingness. Let me see if I can pull up a picture of one quickly. And this was kind of a quick way to deal with things, and quite a fun way to deal with things as well. Where would it have saved? In here. Okay, so that is Door to Nothingness. Let's make it bigger for you guys. So as you can see, if you tap 2 of each color, so if you've got this deck building you infinite mana, you can tap 2 of each color and tap this and sacrifice it, and target player loses the game. So if you're playing Modern or Standard, you only have one opponent that you need to kill, as opposed to Commander, where you typically have up to like four opponents. So this wins you the game, pretty much. So that was just a fun little extra. I only ever got to use it once while it was in this deck, so that's why I eventually removed it. I've put it into... don't actually know which deck it's in. I think it's in my Sliver deck because it's a 5-color deck and it needs 5 colors to do anything. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's in my Sliver deck. But yeah, so that's this deck, the original one that I bought back in the day. I would like to rebuild it in its original format because, like I said, I only play Commander these days. So I don't really need a particularly strong modern deck, and so if I can rebuild it with the original cards that it had, because I'm pretty sure I've still got all the actual originals from that deck, they're just in other boxes lying around somewhere, then I can potentially fully rebuild this deck for sentimental value, I guess. Okay, so yeah, I was going to show you guys the first Commander deck that I got, but I'm watching the time and we've hit the hour mark, so I don't want to go on for too long tonight, so I'm going to turn to chat at this point, and and ask if anyone's watching. Do you have any questions about anything? Particular cards? Don't worry. Okay, I think you are behind. Yeah, I think you are behind, Lee. Okay. So, yeah, if there are any questions in particular that you guys want to ask, fire away. I'm happy to spend a little bit of time now answering any of your questions, if you've got any. Okay, you are behind because internet's bad, and yes, it's regarding you asking how I'm doing. Okay, cool. So I was right. My brain isn't fully dysfunctional. Cool, glad to see that. Well, I mean, some might argue that, but that's besides the point. For those of you wondering what I'm drinking, it's just Monster. It's nothing particularly interesting. Trying to think of some frequently asked questions that I get from people that are learning how to play. So something that is important to remember when you're playing a game is when you've got creatures out and you're attacking your opponent, so you choose to attack them and not the creatures that they control. They then choose whether they're going to allow the creatures they're blocking with to block any of the things you're attacking with. So you would basically choose whether or not to attack based off of whether they've got anything big and scary out. If you've got something that could potentially kill what they have, then attack away. But you attack them, and not you don't choose their creatures to attack. So that's a common question I get asked. Another is, once you've used land, can you use it again to play something else? Yes, you can. So remember, your land untaps at the start of each of your turns. So once it's untapped, you can then tap it to pay the mana cost to play something else, okay? Once you've used it to play something, it doesn't mean that it's then unusable for anything else. You can reuse it the following turn once it untaps. How many spells can you play in a turn? As many as you can pay the mana cost for. So if you have 5 mana available, you have a 2 mana cost creature and you have a 3 mana cost instant. You can play both of those because you can afford them. So yeah, I mean, I've seen people using a similar combo to what I just demoed for infinite mana. And actually, someone used it last night. They essentially made almost infinite mana and used it to pay for an effect that allowed them to essentially bring something back from their graveyard. And so they kept on over and over again playing a creature which, because of one of the effects of a card that I had, died straight away, but because they played it, they got to destroy something. So they just carried on destroying everything until the creature that I had out was the last thing, and then they blew that up, and then they had stuff that they could attack with. So yeah, you can literally play a spell any number of times as long as you can afford it. Or sorry, you can play as many spells as you're able to in one turn, as long as you can afford it. What other frequently asked questions do I get? I think that's it at this point. So yeah, I will do another live stream next Wednesday, another midweek Magic, but it won't be an introduction to Magic. I think at this point the intro is done. If there are any kind of questions that you'd like, leave them in comments below the video after it posts. But next week, what I'm planning on doing is starting to go through my collection. Um, I have a few bits and pieces which I'd like to show off, and just give you guys an idea of where you can end up if you start collecting now, what your collection could end up looking like in 10 years. So that's what I'm planning on doing next episode. So if you're keen to see what my collection looks like, and some of the really cool bits and pieces that I've got in it, like the Lord of the Rings stuff. The Lord of the Rings stuff is some of my particular favorites. Then tune in next week, same time, same place. So 7:30 on Wednesday for Midweek Magic. And if you aren't tuning into that, then next video that or next stream that I'll be doing will be on Friday again. And that'll be my weekly Assassin's Creed stream. So you guys can look forward to that. And I think that's it for this week. Oh, I might stream again on Sunday. I might do another Once Human stream. I've been playing quite a lot of it, so I'm a lot further than I was in Sunday's playthrough. And so yeah, if you really enjoyed watching that stream, then you guys are welcome to tune in to watch the next one and see the progress that I've made, where we're at, and all the fun new stuff in the game. I'd like to try and get one or two more people in for the next one, and there's some exciting stuff that I want to show Scuzz when he joins next time. So you guys have that to look forward to. But other than that, enjoy the rest of your week, guys. I'll catch those of you that are watching the Assassin's Creed stream on Friday. But from me, that is it for now. Have a good one, and stay safe out there, guys. Stay warm. It's getting a little bit cold again. But yeah. Have a good evening, guys. Cheers.